Oh, hello. Welcome to the 2013 Hundie Challenge. Today we're going to be discussing Living Loving Maid by Lauren Green. Dee-doo-dee-doo-doo, dee-doo-doo-doo-dee-doo-doo-doo-doo, dee-doo-dee-doo-doo, dee-doo-doo-doo-dee-doo-doo-doo. I started reading this book, and I was afraid that it was going to turn out to be another On the Lighthouse. If you don't remember my review from that book, I no shit got nothing out of that book. I don't like to think that I'm a low-level reader. I like to think I can handle, difficult and opaque things. I even got a little something out of Finnegan's Wake, But To the Lighthouse was just, brutal. I couldn't make heads or tails of it. I started reading Loving, and I was afraid it was going to be the same kind of thing. It was a little easier to follow, but, they introduced characters without saying who they were. There's, characters with multiple names. There's two Alberts. It's one of these things where you're supposed to catch up on things as they're happening, but a lot of it relies on you knowing about, World War II Ireland and how things were, and that's not necessarily my forte, that era. But as time went on, it started to hold together a little bit better. I'm not sure still that I would recommend it, but it wasn't as bad as I initially thought. The plot, such as it is basically during the war, Ireland was neutral. Despite, they were fearful that there would be an invasion, either by the Germans or the Allies. So this castle, I gather it was a British castle despite being in Irish territory. Because a lot of the characters had problems with the local Irish, population. So they pick up when the Blitz was going on in London, they sent the children basically out of the city and sent them out to the country so that they wouldn't get bombed. And at this castle in Ireland, they pick up one such child, because I gather the owners are British rather than Irish. So the owner of the castle, she's a dunce. She's kind of, not a dunce, but like a, cloud cuckoo lander, So she loses stuff consistently, and so she's always losing things. She'll lose her, gardening gloves, and then it'll turn up a little bit later, even when she makes a big fuss to the waitstaff. So what happens is, I guess shortly before the book begins, the butler dies. And again, I don't know much about this era in history or what it means, but I gather that the butler was kind of the head of the household staff. So the butler dies, and another servant of some sort, steps up and is like, oh, whoa, I'm the new butler. I have to take over as the butler. And starts making people call him Mr. Raunce instead of Charlie and this sort of thing. And the owner always called the butler, regardless of what his name was, down through the ages, she always called the butler Arthur. Because I guess they once had a butler named Arthur, so she, being a, cloud cuckoo lander, kept up this calling every generation, if you want to call it that, of butler Arthur. So the new butler, Charlie Raunce, comes in and says, I don't want to be called Arthur. I want to be called, Mr. Raunce. And so everybody thinks that he's all full of himself, and the wait staff, the serving staff, they're all upset about it. The owner loses a ring, and they all, are like, whatever, she loses stuff all the time. And then the rest of the book is kind of about, different people find the ring, they're thinking about selling it, becoming independently wealthy, who's chiseling from who. It was all kind of jumbled and complicated, and, it was one of these things where, it can be a benefit, and in fact, I do this when I'm writing, and a lot of great writers do this, and a lot of bad writers should do this, but you should talk around the subject sometimes. So, like, if I say to you, if I'm a character and I say to the other character, where's the ring? You know, a guilty character is not going to say, oh, I don't know, or, oh, it's over there. You know, the guilty character is going to be like, oh, well, you know, let me tell you an interesting story I heard about rings once. Did you ever hear the Nibelungenlied? You know, or, oh, that emerald, that's, you know, that sapphire, that's the September birthstone, or, you know, whatever. The problem with this book is everyone was talking at odds so much, you could never follow a conversation. I never knew what the fuck they were talking about, because everyone was spending the whole time dancing around the conversation so much, and without being in their heads, I didn't know why they were constantly doing this dance. So nobody's ever saying anything. What it felt like was every piece of dialogue was a non sequitur. Which, like I said, that's fine. You don't always have to put everything on the nose and answer every question directly, but it's confusing when that's all that ever happens. I don't know who was in love with who. Nobody appeared to be in love with anybody. The book was called Loving, and, you know, Charlie Ronce ended up running off with some random woman at the end. I don't know. It was confusing, and it was complicated, and it wasn't that great. And I don't know that it would have benefited a whole lot from me doing the research and knowing everything about, you know, the neutral Irish state in World War II. I don't know that I would have gotten that much more out of it. But, you know, it was a touch better than a few of these books I've been reading, so I can't, like, wholly discount it. I don't know. It wasn't that great. Thanks for tuning in. Next time we will be talking about Under the Net by Iris Murdoch.